devil shoe. You want to talk about devil shoe, Jack? I'll tell you about devil shoe. I was walking, listen, son, I was walking in the shoes of the devil before you was in your mama's loins, Jack. You little rappers running around, Jack. Little rappers running around, do a little hot stepping. You got little rappers running around hot stepping, selling devil shoes. I got your devil shoes, son. It's called a damn flip-flop. I was walking in the devil's shoes on the seas of Galilee in my mind. Talk about devil shoes, son. I walk on the devil every day. Let me tell you, boy, I got your devil shoes. It's a ratty hobo's flip-flop. That's the devil shoe, son. I sell them for 666 pesos, son. Goop.
You didn't even know your boy Charlie sold devil shoes, did you? The real cost was 666 souls. Why are rappers selling Snickers, tennis shoes, some might say, with Bible verses, devil symbols, pentagrams, and so-called human blood? Now, on one level, yeah, this is a gimmick, right? It's the idea that if you cause a bunch of controversy, you can make bank, right? You can stack cash, make a lot of money through controversy, get everybody talking, right? Get everybody yapping. And that's, marketing, viral marketing 101. So in one way, I guess it was a very successful viral marketing campaign. And, I noticed that LIL NAS X does have some interesting friends. Here you see him with old Jostein, right? Miles and miles of teeth right there. Himself, old Jostein. And he and LIL NAS X seem to be chilling there, which is an odd pairing, but it's not really odd if you think about what we're talking about here. Right? We're talking about the creation of culture creation. And a lot of people think culture creation, or the what's called culture, is really just an organic thing that perhaps is now dominated by money. Oh, it's all about making money. Everybody's doing what they do to make money, as if there's no higher order or level of power, control, or commitment beyond merely making money. Now, if you know about how the Federal Reserve works and how fiat money works, and you know that the control of money, right, has been in the hands of private banks for a long time. So the printing of money, fiat money, means that the elite have had control of money at the tip-top level, right, at the very top. So they don't need money. There's not a need to amass more wealth when you control the money printer, make it go, right? That's what the money printer do. So at the highest level, what's more important is social control. And social control is not aimless. It's not purposeless. It has a goal. The goal, of course, being to bring in this technocratic Davos world government great reset project that we talked so much about for many, many years. In fact, I just shared the other day the video I made on Davos years ago. So although LIL NAS X is not at the top of the pyramid, I think what these kinds of things signify is who you really serve. And I did a video the other day on Rockfin where I was talking about how I conceive of this structure. Right? Now, this is at the human level. Obviously, I think there's a spiritual tier above this, you could say. But on the human level, you've got, right, the wealthiest people on the planet, the 0.01%, not really the 1%. And they comprise the banks, the Fortune 100, the Fortune 500. Below that, you've got the enforcement class, the government class. And by the way, in that category, you can include NGOs, think tanks, right? Entities that socially engineer and plan, universities. And then kind of underneath that strata of the pyramid, you've got the enforcers, the local city council, local police, right? These kinds of entities that kind of enforce this top-down project. I'm not saying everybody in any of these levels, right, is involved. Not everybody who works in law enforcement or government or even at the Fortune 100 or 500, even all the CEOs is necessarily committed to Lucifer or knows about some kind of plan. But what I'm saying is that the narrative that we have in scripture, right? Think of the Tower of Babel, that kind of stuff. Like it fits this explanation of how the world works perfectly. And so because it has such explanatory power, right? It makes perfect sense as to how to categorize and explain and give a context and a meaning to these kinds of events, even pop culture events that seemingly are going to pass away, right? Nobody's going to remember these stank shoes, these stank ass shoes, right? In 6 months, they'll be forgotten. Just like nobody remembers Celine Dion and her new clothing line, right? Which was a obviously quasi esoteric, occultic, dark occultic kind of clothing line. And a lot of people don't even know that clothing has for a long time been a part of social engineering. This is evident when you look at, right, the history of clothing. If you look at how it's used to signify like the beliefs of a culture, the beliefs of a people, the soul of a people, just like architecture, right? Architecture does and serves the same function. And so this explains why so much of the Madison Avenue, right? All that garbage, weird clothing. It's not even clothing, right? It's like, I don't even know what it's supposed to be art, but it doesn't even make any sense unless the plan was to degenerate the culture. Then it starts to make sense why you would see this or this, what? Right? Or this. And I mean, I'm a person who dresses kind of ridiculous, right? Often. So I'm not trying to be some kind of weirdo Puritan 1950s businessman, right? I'm not saying you got to do that, but style and is a part of the arts. It does signify the belief of a people. And when we see this kind of nonsense, right, that I'm showing you here, these kinds of bizarre images, it's obvious that this is something else. In fact, there was a whole, quote, fashion show that was done a couple of years ago in the UK that was self-consciously dedicated to, right, the demonic. It was self-consciously Luciferian. And I think it was done in an old church, if I recall, right? Now, of course, Anglicans, that's not really a church, but point being is that, right, this gives an explanation as to why the whole of society, whole of modernity is essentially uprooted itself from tradition, uprooted itself from value, from meaning. And in the arts, what happens is that you get what's called emotivism, right? The idea that the highest form of inspiration or meaning that could be put into artwork is just something emotive, emotional, right? And it really just becomes a narcissistic reflection of the individual so-called artist. Now, sometimes, you know, people can be very talented, even if they are evil or wicked people. But in many cases, it's not even about the talent. It's not about trying to display beauty, right? I mean, the older and ancient medieval ideas of what art is or was supposed to be was to reflect harmony, order, proportion, symmetry, aesthetics, right? Which is a real branch of philosophy. But when a society completely abandons any notion of objectivity, of facts, of meaning, of a story, of a narrative, of a history, of a myth, etc., then what happens is that people group's artwork will reflect that. And art has this symbiotic function where the art that's put out into the world affects the psyche is then affected, and then it puts out new art, and you get this vicious cycle. And if you put out enough garbage, if you put out enough vomiting on canvases and, you know, whatever else, then what you get is more and more toxic sludge, right? You get more feedback loops, you get more and more debased culture. And this is an intentional plan. In fact, there have been books written on this about how culture can be debased through the arts. In fact, this was a huge part of the Cold War, right? The Cultural Cold War, Francis Stoner Saunders, this whole book discusses how the CIA was involved in the arts to fight the Soviets, to fight Soviet realism, Soviet cosmism, etc. All these different Soviet strategies of art were combated and opposed by the so-called libertine, quote unquote, abstract art promoted by the CIA by Foucault, Derrida, right? All those guys actually worked with the CIA. The Congress for Cultural Freedom, for example. All this is brought up in Francis Stoner Saunders' book. And my point there, by the way, is not to say that Soviet realism or Sovietism is somehow some superior form of art. No, it's pretty horrendous. I mean, although some of it has a bizarre kind of appeal, I would say. And even some abstract art, you could say, has some kind of an appeal. But on the whole, it was part of psychological warfare. The arts were 100% part of psychological warfare. That's why this is discussed here, right? As I've talked about for many, many years, the CIA was involved in that kind of artwork. It was part of psychological warfare. And we have to keep that in mind when we look at Lil Nas X, when we look at Devil Shoes, right? Devil Shoes, tiptoeing, tap dancing with the devil, like Sammy Davis Jr. or something, right? Because it's also, right, we talked about the money level, we talked about the viral meme level, we talked about culture and clothing, we talked about the psychological warfare angle. There's also a higher level which deals with the spiritual reality. Now, not everybody takes this seriously, and not everybody believes in the reality of spiritual forces and all that, but some people do. And some people believe that you're actually affecting the shagosphere, to use the word of Matthew McConaughey in True Detective, right? That you're actually affecting the spiritual realm by putting these ritual works, you could say, out into the world. So it's a kind of witchcraft, right? Why would you have blood in the shoe? Because it's a kind of relic. It's a kind of putting out a magically charged object into the world. And I had a conversation a couple of years ago with a woman who was involved in the high art world. And she claimed that a lot of the people in that world, right? Think of someone like a Damien Hirst or this kind of a person, right? The people in that high art world, so-called, yes, there's the angle of it being money laundering and all that, I'm aware. But many of them believe in it like a kind of animism, like a kind of voodoo. So they think that they're putting their magical energy and work into their artwork. They're putting their artwork out into the world, and then thus that becomes their kind of magical incantation or spell, right? They're doing the work of the magus. Now, I know that sounds crazy to some people, but some people believe this, right? That's a real thing. And this is why, right, you get in indigenous cultures, in the shamanic tradition, you get a lot of artwork that's intended to do just that, right? The art is directly connected to the spiritual beliefs. Anyway, thank you for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed this explanation. Hope it makes more sense in terms of what we're seeing on the big scale, the big picture, the spiritual reality behind this kind of stuff. Be sure to like and share. This video needs to get out. You need to show people that this is what's really going on with these kinds of, you could say, relics, right? Pop culture relics in the religious sense.